welcome back to another episode of Decoded, a Lost Codex podcast. I'm your host, Jesse, the writer, director, and narrator for the Lost Codex episodes. And today I have a very special guest, one who, if you listened to last week's episode on my review for Before the Storm, I built him up a little bit. I talked about how much I wanted to do this show with him. Please welcome my friend, Jack. Welcome, Jack.
Hi. Oh, man. I've been built up. This is going to be great.
People have had a week to, I think a lot of people, not to say that you're like a disappointing guest, but I kept saying, you know, my special guest is coming in, and people, I hope no one thought that I was bringing on like Christy Golden or Mike Morheim, because for me, and there's a reason why.
No, this is better.
This is better than Mike Morheim on my podcast, and here's why this is better. Jack is a good friend of mine. Just before the show, we determined that we met 8 years ago in WoW. Eight years ago. Like, that is... I have family members who are younger than that, and which is a bizarre thought. We actually met on Wormrest Accord, the one of the North American role-playing servers, and we both role-played Forsaken back in the day. And for anyone who's familiar with my machinima work, I wrote I Am Forsaken back in the day, based around my RP character, Lucius, and that's where I met Jack 8 years ago. And actually, we've known each other for 8 years, been great friends for 8 years, but we only met for the first time in person this past BlizzCon, isn't that right?
That's true. That is true. Like, very briefly.
Very briefly, and it was enough to...
Actually, that place is a fucking labyrinth.
Now that this is coming up, I'm gonna on screen. You guys might see a visual of Jack and I sitting in the audience at BlizzCon. I'm gonna get. Jack
I was lost 90% of the time. No joke, seriously.
Okay, BlizzCon is not that hard to navigate. If you downloaded the app, you would have been fine. This year is going to be different. BlizzCon 2018, you're going to be a pro. You're going to be able to walk backwards out in that place and know.
It's dark. It's so dark. Nothing is. The app doesn't map to anything.
It's the Undercity. It's you know how confusing
it is. The Undercity,
pretty much, which is fitting for this episode. So the reason I wanted Jack on with this episode was because there are so many story elements that happen in Before the Storm that are so exciting to Forsaken, the story, Forsaken role players, things Jack and I have talked about for years. And I knew the second I finished this book, there was only one person who can come on. And so, for anyone who's a Forsaken fan, for anyone who's a Sylvanas fan, Jack is your guy. This is the guy. This is the person. Shannon, one of my previous hosts, is the Tauren Master. Jack is the Forsaken Master. So, this episode, if you don't like Forsaken, you're not going to like this episode, but that's not...
The Forsaken have been near and dear to my heart since The Frozen Throne came out. So, it's been a while. We've been together.
That's a long time.
It's been a crazy trip. I have defended Sylvanas, you know.
Ooh,
I want
to get into this right away, but we can't. We have a little bit of news, and then we're gonna dive right into that, because I know the second I open those floodgates for Jack, there's no closing that.
That's true.
We're gonna dive to some weekly news. PTR has hit the 8.0 release. The pre-event is around the corner. We have no idea. It's probably going to be the first week of July. I'm assuming second week of July. Burning of Teldrassil is coming, guys. We still don't have the login screen for Battle for Azeroth, but the PTR is now on 8.0 release, so any day now, any week now, we're getting something big. We're getting some new stuff to do in game. Did you watch the WoW Q&A the other day, Jack?
I did not.
Okay.
I am so terrified of spoilers. I finished the book literally 30 minutes ago, so...
Oh, and I was going to mention that after, but we'll mention that now. Jack just finished the book. No word of a lie. Literally 30 minutes ago. And so this is all fresh in his head, which is why it didn't actually turn out to be that way. Recording got pushed back a little bit due to our schedules, but he just finished the very end, the whole end piece 30 minutes ago. But in the WoW Q&A, there was some news. You can find it on WoW and MMO Champion. But the one piece of news that stuck out to me was the artifact skin problem. And I'm going to go off on a little bit of a tangent here because I don't know if you're aware, Jack, but artifact skins, all of your artifact skins that you unlock in Legion are remaining spec locked in Battle for Azeroth. And to me, that's problematic. And here's why. Here's why it's problematic. So the whole idea of the weapons in Legion, you have to be the master of your weapon, of your spec to use that weapon. And sure. I get it. There's a narrative there, and they don't want a Fury Warrior to be using the arms weapons because, if you're going to be using an artifact appearance, you're going to be using your artifact appearance for your spec. And that makes sense. But the artifact storyline is coming to a close any week now. We're going to be getting rid of our artifacts for good. I won't spoil what happens, but there's a good reason why we put them aside and decided not to carry the Ashbringer into Battle for Azeroth. And it's a pretty good reason. It's a reason that basically prevents the factions from being imbalanced in terms of, well, who gets, the scepter that destroyed Draenor? Which faction gets that? Let's not give that to Sylvanas, because that's a horrible idea. All of the artifacts have a reason of why they don't continue into the next expansion. Their storylines, for the meantime, are done. So why not allow us to use these weapons, not cross-class. I don't want to see a warrior running around with Ashbringer. That's not what I'm asking. But Holy Paladins have a two-handed mace. And Ret Paladins have a two-handed sword. There is one of the skins, I believe it's the PvP skin for Holy Paladins, that looks like the Judgment set from Vanilla WoW. It's amazing. It looks like it looks like a weapon that you would see in old school Warcraft 2 Paladins. And Absolutely. I thought, how amazing would that be to be a Ret Paladin in Judgment running around with this hammer, even though it's a holy skin? Well, you can't because Blizzard's not allowing it. Now, they are allowing for certain cases, Holy Paladins use a two-handed mace. In Battle for Azeroth, they're probably going to go back to the one-handed mace shield option, which goes to say, well, now I can't use my artifact weapon. Blizzard did come out and announce that if you are using a one-hander and a shield, but you want to use the appearance of your two-hander, you can actually transmog your one-hander and shield to look like your two-hander from Legion. If that's what you want. Which is, okay, that's a little bit of that's a step. But to me, why take that step? Why not just unlock the specs across the board? Like, why not allow Ret Paladins to use the Silver Hand? Literally, the weapon is called the Silver Hand. It is literally the weapon of Tyr the Titan Keeper, who was a warrior for the Titan Keepers. He was one of the Titan Keepers. And
let me tell you, this is a digression. We used to speculate back in the day what Tyr's Fall meant, and having that validated so recently is so exciting. I love Tyr. I love the story of the Silver Hand, and I want to be able to use that weapon on all of my...
Right? Like, I remember those conversations about Tyr's Fall being, what if this is Tyr's Fall? Tonight, guys, in this podcast, there's going to be a lot of headcanons that Jack and I have come up with that just get validated in the best way possible. This is the first. This is the first of many. Anyway, I'm going to bring this rant to a close. Ultimately, I believe that if you've unlocked the skins, it should be available to all of your alts of that particular class on all specs. Let feral druids, guardian druids, who have to quickly jump into cat form, let them use their mage tower cat form, even if they're in bear form. What's the big deal? They've unlocked it. They've earned it. Why not let them use it? To me, it just seems unnecessarily gating this. And I'm always one to try and look at things from a game developer perspective. I'm not a game developer, so I don't always see things the way they do. But I can't find a logical reason as to why you would want to gate this for some weapons and not others. Blizzard allowing Holy Paladins to transmog their one-handers to two-handers, that's okay. Mages. What if you get a sword and an offhand, but you really want to use a Luneth? Well, Blizzard said that you can change your sword and offhand to look like your staff in case you're playing an arcane mage. That's fine. But it's like, why make those one or two circumstantial decisions when you can just unlock it across the board? That's my rant. For the evening in terms of WoW news. Earlier this week, there was an E3 story panel with Taryn Gregory, Christy Golden, and Steve Deniseur from Blizzard. They talked about weaving in all these different story elements into the game and how big of a project it is. A lot of people say that Blizzard's writing is awful because there's so many writers, and it's like, you really got, if you get a chance to go back and watch the stream, definitely do it, because you really get a perspective of how many people, you have the quest writers who write a big portion of the lore, but then you have CDev, and then you have, the cinematic filmmakers, you have all these different writers, and then we have Christy Golden there as well. So I really wanted to talk about that panel, but we can talk about that in terms of storytelling at another date. And before we dive into the podcast, we have some birthdays to cover. Probably the most important birthday ever. A very happy birthday to our brand manager for the Lost Codex, Zillions. Happy birthday, Z. Thank you for all that you do, everything you have done.
Happy birthday.
Jack says happy birthday. Everyone who's listening to this is saying happy birthday to you, Z. It is belated at this point, so I'm sorry. This is late for you, Z. I'm sorry. But everything that you've done for us, thank you so much. Go ahead and follow her on Twitter at ZZILLIONS, Zazillions. Little heart and crossbones icon there on Twitter. She's awesome. And she's also the brand manager for some guy named Final Boss TV, but, he's okay. One of my regulars in my Discord, Skull Shorties, who makes some awesome machinima and speculation lore videos, he just had a birthday a couple weeks ago, so happy belated birthday to you, Skull. And Jack, your birthday was in April, so
it was.
Happy belated. Happy belated there, Jack. Happy belated birthday.
Thank you.
I wish I knew that.
Happy birthday, Skull.
Happy birthday, Skull, and Jack and Z. I wish I knew that back in April, because I would have. All right, we're diving into this podcast. Let's get messy here.
Let's get into it
right away off the bat. We're going to talk about Forsaken. What did we learn about the Forsaken in this story, Jack?
Oh God. Where do I even start? What didn't we learn? Where do we start? Honestly.
That's
Elsie.
I think Elsie and hatred.
The Desolate Council. Hatred, yes. So we've been told for almost a decade that the only emotion that the Forsaken can feel is hatred, with any real strength. Hatred, anger, rage, vengeance. But Elsie is one of the characters in the book who we first encounter as embracing positive emotion. And she's not just able to embrace it, she's able to express it. And she comes to the realization that anger isn't good for the Forsaken. And that is actually rather radical. That is something that we haven't been told before. And that has huge implications.
I think that also goes to show, when we look at the Horde in terms of, Blizzard loves to use the word morally gray. Let's look at the Horde, very quick summary. The Tauren, very peaceful. The nicest ones of the Horde. The Blood Elves, they're not evil, they're not twisted. They've had a lot of their own problems. Orcs have always been problematic, but recently they've gotten beat down a lot, and for the most part, all those radical, insane, cruel orcs, they're gone.
The Kor'kron.
The Kor'kron are gone. Garrosh's era is gone. We have goblins who are just greedy and slimy. They're not evil. They're just the rats of the Horde, as Sarfang said. Trolls, most trolls are okay. The Darkspears are the chill trolls. Trolls are evil and savage and cannibals, but the Darkspear, they're okay. They're bros. But the Forsaken have always been this dark... The villains in the Horde. They've always... And we saw that with the Wrathgate. We saw that, when you said vengeance earlier, Putress's voice filled my head, death to the Scourge and death to the living, as they just decimate the Alliance and Horde forces at the Wrathgate.
Death to the living. That has been a war cry for the Forsaken, even more than for the Horde. Especially more than for the Horde. And now, maybe not.
The Wrathgate event is so huge and so important in lore. The Alliance loses almost 5,000. The Horde loses over 4,000 soldiers. That is a lot of soldiers, all because Putress, and we'll come back to Putress later, but death to the Scourge and death to the living has been this iconic battle cry for the Forsaken, and nothing else has ever really come through with the Forsaken. So when you see Elsie mourning Forsaken at this little vigil, when she's smiling at the crowd, she sees other Forsaken are mourning. They are feeling sad for the loss, but there's no cries of injustice. There's no anger. That's a huge moment for the Forsaken. And I was sitting here going, whoa, this is different.
when she was speaking to that blacksmith, this was just a normal man, not a radical, not somebody who was especially outspoken in the community, like Bartholomew of the Argent Crusade. This is just a normal dude living his life in the Undercity, normal as you can be as Forsaken. And he said to her, I chose to receive the gift. I know others didn't. At the time, I thought them fools, but now I wonder. I know Lady Sylvanas is trying to find ways that we can continue our existence. But what if we weren't meant to? That's huge. This is just a regular Forsaken saying something like this to somebody who would later become the leader of the Desolate Council. There are schisms showing in Forsaken society.
Which is so interesting because the Forsaken have always been portrayed as these, a lot of people refer to Sylvanas as people in game, almost like her fanboys in a way, where they're like they're these blind followers, and fanboy,
and that used to make sense.
It did. She was their queen. She broke that voice in their head, the Lich King's voice. It was her. She's the one who. It wasn't her who did that, but she was the one who rallied them after that voice stopped when they didn't have that master controlling them. She was the one who said, "We will get vengeance against the guy who did this to us," and they rallied to her cause.
She didn't break it, but she was the one who was there for them.
She was there at the time. It was actually Illidan. They should have followed Illidan. Illidan should have been the Banshee Queen because he was.
Illidan should have been the Banshee Queen. He would have looked great in that armor.
He would have, especially the vanilla armor, the skimpy back then. Or no, she was a Night Elf back then. Confirmed. So Sylvanas was Illidan back then because remember she used a Night Elf model back in the day.
They just retconned it.
It did. I used to love when she used to give you like sass back in the game, and she'd be very aggressive, and then she'd do her little Night Elf bounce.
The bounce.
Very lighthearted, and you're like, what are you doing? And then finally she got her own model in Wrath. She only recently got a full set of armor. Up until then,
yes, she did start covering her midriff. She needs to be taken seriously.
She covered up. The demons started to target her belly. They were like, you know what? This is
soft tissue.
We know where to stab you now, Sylvanas. It took us a couple years, but we got you. So with that said, the Forsaken have this ability to feel emotions that aren't just anger and vengeance. She feels sad, and Parqual, I remember this quote stands out in my mind. Parqual says he joins up with Velcinda, who creates this Desolate Council, because there are emotional and physical needs of the Forsaken that are not being met. And emotional needs of the Forsaken that are not being met. I read that line like 3 times in a row going, whoa.
And it's true.
There's a lot here, and it's so cool because we're going to dive a little bit into, we're going to talk about roleplay a lot tonight. And
oh, good.
We've done a lot of discussion. Anyone who's listened here with my podcast with Issei, we've talked about storytelling in game, and a lot of people just seem to dismiss roleplay as this really, everyone thinks of roleplay in World of Warcraft. You think of erotic roleplay, and you think of that certain village in Eloin Forest, which will not be named. You think of a lot of negative aspects, but one of the coolest parts about role-playing in World of Warcraft is, you don't have to play the hero, you don't have to play the big, huge, super guy, super gal. You can play the people of your faction how you want to, and playing Forsaken back in the day,
you can live the lore.
You can live the lore without being the commander. And back in the day, we used to talk about, as Forsaken, happiness wasn't something that came to the Forsaken so easily, and it was really interesting to talk about these emotions and how it was almost a no-no. It was almost a cultural, well, you can't be a proud and happy-go-lucky Forsaken, because that's not normal, and both in terms of lore, but you thought about it for like this, them as a species, they weren't running around skipping around and being happy. But it turns out, after all this time, vengeance has faded, and there's room there for that ability to be sad or to be happy or hopeful. Hopeful is one of the biggest themes of this book.
Back in the day, back when Arthas still reigned in the north, vengeance was useful. Vengeance was powerful and necessary to defeat him. And when we roleplayed, it was viewed as necessary. If you roleplayed as a Forsaken who was nostalgic for life, you were expected to be sorrowful, not joyful, not fond in your memories, but stricken by the fact that you had that life taken from you and that Arthas was to blame. And you had to take that and forge it into anger to use against the Lich King. But now the Lich King's gone. And what do we do with these emotions? Do we keep it as vengeance? This is the question that the Forsaken are asking. Do we keep holding on to vengeance when there is no target? Why should we hate the living when the living are the ones who we used to love? It's very compelling.
And I'm so glad that Christie Golden was given the chance to write this story, because, Jack and myself and our guildmates back in the day, characters like Cornelius and the character named Aphie, we used to talk about these things, but it would never be, it was never canon. It was never upfront in the lore. And now it is with this book. Suddenly all these philosophical questions about the Forsaken are bubbling up. And there's a lot of cool little facts as well. Specifically with Elsie and stuff that was really cool for role players. Jack, you brought up that she changed her name when she became
yes
Forsaken. And that was something that happened to the guild a lot often. We had a lot of characters who did change their name to be either more intimidating or just a totally different name altogether.
Yeah, my name used to be, Ava Gladwell, but now I go by Deathbringer of Sorrow because I choose to shed my former life. That was a big theme, shedding your former life and embracing the rebirth that the Dark Lady has given you. But some people chose to go back to their name. Now, when we were role-playing our characters had chosen to keep their names, to continue living the lives that they had lived before in some fashion, as a shade perhaps, but in some fashion. And it's interesting to see that canonized in a book.
And there's two examples here. We have Elsie Benton. She becomes Velcinda, leader of the Desolate Council. She changes her name when she dies.
It's an epic name.
Velcinda. And it works well. When I first got introduced to Velcinda, I thought, like, is this Elsie? Is this his Elsie? And I thought, Velcinda, Elsie. And I was like, it's maybe there. And then when it happened, it was like, oh, that's clever. I like that. But then we got Parkwall.
There's some assonance, yeah.
Parkwall didn't change his name at all. He kept his name. He kept, and that might have been because of who he was. He was a historian. And
he was proud.
He was proud of that name. And I don't know if you remember this character, Jack, but Parkwall was actually a character in Vanilla. He stood on the bridge connecting to the Apothecarium, and he got you to go out into the world to find books for him because he got in trouble and he wasn't allowed to go get them himself. And
I'm squinting.
Back in the day, the quest was called the Test of Lore, and he used to send you around the world to get these books. And when you talked to him on the bridge, I went and talked to him the other day in game. He's still there, and his flavor text is, "Well, hello, friend. It's good to talk to someone." So his Wowpedia file has been changed recently, but one of the things that used to say was he was abnormally happy for a Forsaken. And this was even back in the day. This was a vanilla quest. Back in the day, he was a strangely talkative and positive Forsaken. And I think, and in the book, he actually makes mentions. He says he sent out some adventurers to get his books. That was a reference to us back in the day. And he actually goes out to his former lodgings to get some books. And one day he's caught and the guards confiscate the books. And that's why he sends us players out in the day. And it was very interesting to see this little minor vanilla character brought back and to have that positivity, that weirdness for a Forsaken brought to light, no pun intended, in the actual story, and seeing that with not just him, it's other characters as well, with Elsie specifically.
And that's really why I find Forsaken to be compelling. When we role-played back in the day, I tried to embrace that dichotomy, that dissonance of a Forsaken who has these memories, who's lived a long life and has only been undead for a few years, struggling with themselves, saying, do I still be who I was, who I have been for so long? Or do I become somebody anew? It's it's really interesting to see somebody who said, no, I'm going to keep on holding on to what I found joyous and what brought me satisfaction in life. And I think it's pretty cool that they took somebody who used to be a simple quest character who was a little quirky and made them into such a profound figure. And it shows where they want the Forsaken to go, honestly.
Which is about damn time, because all that we have, we're specifically shift the conversation right to Sylvanas and the Forsaken as a whole. Recently, when with Arthas being killed, there was a radical shift in, as you said earlier, what do they do with this vengeance? And they've done a lot with that vengeance in not the greatest way. Wrathgate, we'll come back to Wrathgate in a second, but South Shore, Gilneas, Western Plaguelands, there's some farmers who try to settle there. All these different places are just plague bombed. Innocents are killed. South Shore civilians are turned to goo. Gilneas is literally cleared house. And the Forsaken are leading this charge, and a lot of people say Garrosh made Sylvanas attack Gilneas. Chronicle 3 says flat out she wanted Gilneas, so no, it wasn't Garrosh. He's got enough war crimes on his plate. Let's leave that off the menu for now. But South Shore is actually brought up in the story in two retrospectives. Sky Admiral Catherine Rogers is a character from Mists of Pandaria. She's the one who opened fires on Horde soldiers in the water. She's very anti-Horde. She's very bloodthirsty for an Alliance character.
Absolutely.
And her parents were in South Shore when the Forsaken attacked in Cataclysm. And that's why you can go to her ship and you can ask her, why do you hate the Horde so much? And she says, my family was in South Shore before the Cataclysm hit. They're still there. And it's kind of like, okay.
What's great is that when we were in a role-playing guild, we had actually done a plaguing of South Shore before we knew that would happen. And it was fun, and we enjoyed it as Forsaken. It was a great exercise of Forsaken vengeance and use of the plague. We felt powerful as players in that moment.
And I think we used the little engineering toys that the smoke flares, the green smoke flares. One of the guild engineers made, I think, about 2,000 of those and gave about 50 to each player. And I actually had a quest item from Howling Fjord that allowed me to throw a plague bomb, and it was only supposed to work at Howling Fjord, but it was actually glitched and it allowed me to use it anywhere, and I could create this explosion of plague everywhere I went. And my character was part of the Royal Apothecary Society, so it was glorious. We marched into South Shore, and it was a PvP event because South Shore at that time was still standing as an Alliance city. This was obviously before Cataclysm came out, and as a guild, we did this attack on South Shore. Let's derail for just a split second and bring up a little conversation. In the story, Kalia Menethil mentions that her and her unknown husband and her daughter get to South Shore, and then the Blight comes and they flee and they get separated. And to me, South Shore was one of the only places in Lordaeron that wasn't hit by the plague. So when you say Blight and South Shore, I and many others, I think you too, Jack, instantly thought Cataclysm. Sure. But this was shortly after the fall of Lordaeron. So she says, for a time we were safe. Well, was that time like a month, or was that time like 8 years? Because that's not a time. That's a your daughter is now fully grown kind of thing. Like what's going on? And I believe that it wasn't the Forsaken, because she goes right after and says she was waiting in Silverpine, and there were some reunions, but there weren't. And that's when Anduin realizes the reason she's so positive to Forsaken is because her daughter and her husband might be one of the Forsaken. And to me, that doesn't make sense for the Forsaken to attack South Shore, unless she doesn't know. For the Forsaken to attack South Shore, and then after be resurrected, like did Kalia would have to either know that they were Forsaken attacking and they were going to resurrect the dead up in Death Knell, or she assumed that they would die and become Scourge, and then at this point in her life, when she's telling Anduin this is the reason she's so hopeful, because now those family members might not be Scourge anymore. They might be Forsaken.
So the plaguing of South Shore is such a cataclysm specific event. Like, South Shore was integral to human society up until Cataclysm happened, which means that Sylvanas is the one who had to have done it. Now, the Warcraft timeline is kind of it's a little unstable. It's a little fraught with deciding the years between events, and that's okay. There's a lot that happens, but I think I would be rather sad if South Shore wasn't made into a Forsaken event. Because not just because of the events that we had, but because I think that it absolves Sylvanas of a serious crime, which was attacking a settlement for no reason other than to gain territory. I would be rather sad if it was just the Scourge.
This is one question that I'm going to ask Christy Golden, hopefully, if I get a chance. Because this is not like some big revelation question. This is just clarification. So I think it's actually, maybe I'll throw a tweet at her. Because what I'm going to accept as headcanon until she says otherwise is that there may have been a Scourge attack. There may have been an attempted Blight attack on South Shore in the early days. And they repel it in some way. Maybe South Shore gets reclaimed. Maybe there is some retconning, but it's not what you think. Because originally, I think the Wowpedia entry said South Shore was one of the only places not touched by the plague. Maybe that's been retconned, and maybe it was taken by the Scourge, and later on, it was reclaimed as an Alliance town. The Alliance reclaimed it back. I think, Christy Golden is very... She wrote specifically right around that time. She wrote the book, The Shattering. She wrote all that stuff.
That's true.
So I think that if she intended it for it to be after, Arthas has just killed Taranis, the Scourge is growing by the day in huge numbers. She escapes to South Shore. We were safe for a time. I think Christy Golden would explain what that time was if it was a long time. For a time, that's a month to me, a couple weeks. But if it was meant to be, we were safe long after my brother went to Northrend, the Third War was over, Cthulhu was killed, the Burning Crusade happened, and then my brother woke up and was killed, and then Deathwing hit. There's a big difference in time there.
Sure.
That I think that she would clarify. So I don't think that this refers to the Forsaken attack, because that also doesn't add up to Kalia's words and thoughts after about hoping her kid and her husband are... We're not scourged. So we'll clarify, but it was interesting. Everyone I've talked to kind of had the same question. What was that about?
I would like to hear clarification. Part of me wonders if maybe Kalia was confused. It's been stated multiple times in Before the Storm that the Alliance couldn't tell the difference between Forsaken and Scourge because of the way that the Forsaken fight and the way that they use Plague. That maybe the attack on South Shore at the behest of Sylvanas looked like a Scourge attack. And, saying they were safe for a time is a very indeterminate way to describe the period during which they were safe. So I would like to hear some clarity, if possible.
That's actually...
I'm open to either direction, honestly.
It's interesting that this confusion may be intentional, actually. It may be something that Christy Golden intended to happen, because it goes to kind of show even Kalia didn't know that it was Forsaken or Scourge, which is why the whole Alliance not accepting the dead, it's a very touchy subject. So maybe that was intentional. So we'll try and get some answers on that. But moving on,
they don't have a meta view of lore like we do.
Exactly,
the characters.
There's perspective on everything. But overall, South Shore, Gilneas, these different plot points, and there's I don't want to spoil a lot for Battle for Azeroth, especially the opening events, but there's some horrifying things that the Forsaken do with the Plague, all the way from Cataclysm till now, and it's all vengeance based. So to see these other characters rising to a point of power in the Desolate Council was, okay, you know what? This faction isn't all about villains. Not that I had a problem with villains. That's almost one of the reasons you kind of got to, a lot of people play Forsaken, is because you get to play as zombies. Like, that's badass. You get to play as these, former Scourge members, and
oh god,
you're not Loktarogar, Horde, Honor worthy. You're Launch the Plagues, you're Putris, Death of the Scourge, Death of the Living. So
you're free-willed villains. It's amazing.
And to have the narrative kind of give you that's a really cool idea, but you also get to question, well, are all Forsaken free-willed villains? Let's steer this to Sylvanas in the book in particular, with Azerite. And when she touches the pommel of Gallywix's staff, and that vision floods into her mind, she sees not only destruction but life, and how closely related life and death are. And I think it says something she's never thought of before. She doesn't see herself as just a destroyer. She sees herself as a goddess, that's important, of creation and destruction. And there was a lot going on. It was very different than Anduin's perspective on Azerite.
Yes, Anduin was very, light-based, but Sylvanas saw it as this great equilibrium, and she was at the center of it, providing both terrible, terrible death, but also this profound second chance at what some may call unlife, but what others may call immortality. And she is at the crux of that, and that's interesting. I was wondering personally if she'd be like, oh man, I'm struck with like what I'm missing in life. But no, Azerite showed her that she, as the Banshee Queen, is in this position to cause great harm and also potentially bring about great power in the world.
Which a lot of people think or have said that Before the Storm, and I even said this in my review last week, Before the Storm isn't a direct tie to Battle for Azeroth, because all the stuff with Kalia, Alonsus Faol, Sylvanas, all the stuff isn't shown in the game. Or so far. And I think that the Azerite plotline is what is the thread to the game. Yeah, and what happens at the end of the book is a long-term plotline. We'll get there in a second, but specifically, I think what really stood out to me in terms... A lot of people say that this book is alliance-based, and I don't think so. And a lot of people say I'm biased. Really? Yeah, a lot of the comments and hatred for this story, and there's people who hate this story. I'm like, what is wrong with you? Hate it because the alliance is painted in such a good way, and the Horde is not. And I sit here going, well, you didn't read the story then, because I had a very good perspective of the Horde.
So did I.
Of the Horde in this book. And that was in relationship to Sylvanas and the Horde. As a Forsaken, as a Sylvanas fan, maybe you shouldn't feel all good and warm inside. But as a Horde member, you should, because Bane, and we're going to talk about the scene in Thunderbluff when Magni shows up, which, by the way, side note, the fact that Magni bitches her out. Magni's the only person on Azeroth who can call her out on her bullshit, and she can't do a thing. What is she going to do to a...
Calls her fucking lassie.
He calls her lassie, he says, pull your little green man, points a finger in her face. Like, what is she going to do to a dwarf made of diamond who couldn't even get up the lift, which is capable of lifting several Tauren? Like, I thought it was so like, is this happening? Is this real life? Is Magni actually Zed-snapping at Sylvanas? This is amazing.
It was glorious. And saying that it was glorious, people may think I'm also an Alliance fanboy, but I have actually been a very ardent Sylvanas defender and apologist for many, many years.
I think your name on my Discord is Forsaken. What was it? Undead Enthusiast.
It was... Or Undead Devil's Advocate.
That was it. Undead Devil's Advocate.
I changed it to Undead Genie because, I have to throw an homage to my old characters. But, I played Sylvanas since she was alive. I remember being a kid and going through those Warcraft 3 quest lines and I saw her as a ranger. I saw her defending the Sunwell and then becoming a banshee. Not even taking a form. She was a spirit. She was a vengeful spirit who had been twisted by Arthas. And that resonated with me. And I thought this person has the power to overthrow this madness. And then she became the Banshee Queen. She helped not liberate the Forsaken. She did not liberate the Forsaken. The Forsaken were liberated by the waning power of the Lich King, but she rallied them, and that's important. She became the leader of the Forsaken when they had no leader. Nobody would take them. When the Tauren had sympathy, yes, but Sylvanas led them. And that was important. She was necessary, and her vengeance was helpful. It gave them purpose. But now things are different.
I remember back in our roleplay days when we were Mystic Chord, Jack and I over the years have had many discussions and debates over Sylvanas. And back in the day, you really helped, it really shaped my opinion on her, because there was this long blockage of what I played in Warcraft 3 to suddenly who she was in Cataclysm, and I didn't really connect with the Forsaken in between launch of WoW until the end of the Wrath of the Lich King. So Jack and I had a lot of discussion about Sylvanas, and I remember a kind of perspective of Jack was, okay, he's a Sylvanas fanboy, but he's convinced me. It was a logical discussion. So going into this, guys, you got to remember that Jack, #1 Sylvanas fan, and so
absolutely. Oh my god, I loved her.
Overall, with this, specifically with that scene in Thunderbluff, though, Bane is Bane and Hamul. What infuriated me about that scene is how she treats Hamul, and a lot of people forget this. Hamul Rune Totem is the Tauren who convinced Thrall to let the Forsaken into the Horde. It wasn't Karen.
Yes.
It was Hamul Rune Totem. He is the reason the Forsaken are in the Horde. And then he says, "You're going to tell the Alliance about everything you learn, right?" And she's like, "No, why would I?" And he just stares at her and goes, "Because this is all of our world, not just the Hordes." And she says, "Well, too bad." And he says, "But," and she turns around and she flips her shit on him. Same with Bane. She puts Bane down. And to me, my inner Tauren pride kind of struck out right there, because above all else, Hamul said, "You're going to share this with the Alliance, right? Because this is our world. We're sharing this planet." And Bane says, "Have you forgotten about the Cataclysm? Is your memory that short for such a long-lived race?" And the fact that Bane and Hamul stood up to her, she put them down very quickly. And at that point, with a character like Sylvanas, you can't keep pressing her buttons. I felt a lot of Tauren pride. A lot of people hate Bane because he's so passive. But that's what Tauren are. What, you want Bane to punch her in the face? Because that's not
peaceful.
That's not peaceful. Garrosh may have done that. Saurfang, given the chance, pushing him, may have done so. Bane, not so much. So I thought that was pretty interesting. And Gallywix's relationship with Sylvanas is they can't stand each other. But
oh no,
she flat out says, "I'm going to kill you," when Gallywix walks away. I think Gallywix invites her into the hot tub. And Nathano says, "I'm going to kill him." And she says, "No, you're not. I will."
I remember that, yeah.
And, but he is totally just like, "Yep, like, I'm in it to make money, and you're in it to be the war chief." Like, I thought their relationship was kind of interesting and very, very goblin-y. Like, there was no trust between Gallywix and Sylvanas at all. And I kind of wonder, what's up his sleeve? Because he's a little bit of a slime ball, but he's also very clever. Overall, not including the Thanos in this discussion, no trolls. I'll admit there were no trolls, and Starfang had a very small appearance. But the Horde stood out to me in a way that, even though it was a small portion, I don't think that the book itself is Alliance heavy versus Horde. It is very Forsaken heavy. You cannot deny that. It is very Forsaken heavy, and it is very priest
heavy. And the Forsaken are the Horde.
So I guess that's where people aren't really looking at it. They think all they see is Anduin and and there was a lot of Anduin chapters, but the bulk of the book,
he certainly prayed to the light a lot.
He did.
It was glorious sometimes.
It was when I see people say that this is an imbalanced book, I'm kind of thinking here going, well, it doesn't it doesn't need to be Horde versus Alliance. It doesn't always need to be balanced, first of all. And second of all,
True.
It was very Forsaken-y and very priest related. So as a warlock, where was my representation? As the gnomes, Anduin didn't even visit the gnomes because he had to go do something in Nether. I was like, come on, bro, go see the gnomes.
Oh, the poor gnomes.
The gnomes are stomped on more than anyone else, and he couldn't even go visit them. But I disagree that this is a Horde weak book and an Alliance heavy book. I disagree immensely.
This is a priest book, I would feel. If you want to make a judgment based on like categorization, I feel like it's a priest book. But that's because the light shows, in this instance, in the lore, the light shows that it can shine over both humanity, which it has always, been loved by, and the undead, who are abhorrent to the light. Faol can wield the light with apparent ease, which is very abnormal. And Kalia, well, I don't know how much you want to get into Kalia on that subject, but the light here is a major factor and an important factor in helping us understand the lore. And I think if you're going to focus on the light, you need priests.
Definitely. And I don't know, I guess people wanted to see, and I guess going into the book thinking that this is going to lead up to the burning of Teldrassil, people are disappointed that it's not that, which is fine, because you want to know why is the Horde burning Teldrassil, but this is telling a different story. We'll come back to that once we cover all the other stuff, but with the topic of this being a very priest-heavy book, obviously Kalia is a major character, and Jack likes to say Kalia, I like to say Kalia. What,
we settled this with Kalia herself actually saying her name, and now I've wait, was it Kalia? I said it wrong just there, didn't I?
Kalia herself says that it's Kalia.
Kalia herself says it's Kalia.
Kalia says you're wrong, Jack.
Kalia, is it Kalia? Kalia? Kalua.
Kalua is her new name, and I wasn't against Kalia, because Kalia sounds, think of the family. Tyrannus, Arthas, a little bit different. So Kalia sounds like the most modern name out of those three. So Kalia seems to be a neat, maybe fantasy way of pronouncing that name. But Kalia in-game does say, my name is Kalia, not Kalua. So Kalia returns in Legion. And when Legion Beta was going on, in Warlords, I texted Jack, and I said, "Do you care for priest class hall spoilers?" And he said no. And I said, "Well, first of all, 2 characters are returned." And I said, "Alonsus Faol is back," and you were like, "Whoa, that's a big. He's Forsaken. I didn't even know. I thought he just died before the plague," which was true. We'll come back to Faol after. And then Kalia came back. And
oh my God.
Jack and I had spent, our guild, we had spent so much time talking, if Sylvanas ever stepped down, got overthrown, killed, who would lead the Forsaken? And for years, literally the duration of Jack and I's friendship for the last 8 years, we have said Kalia Menethil as one of the top contenders. And
or her father.
I would love a ghost leader. Ghost Tyrannus. Ghost Dad, where are you? Come back to us, please.
Ghost Daddy.
Ghost Papa, where are you? So with Kalia coming back, the first question Jack texted me was, is she alive or dead? Is she undead? I said, no, she's alive. And he's like, interesting. And I said, apparently Faol's been hiding her, and we don't really know anything. And I thought, and I remember we were discussing, and I remember saying, she's being brought back for a reason. And she's only a class hall follower.
I remember this conversation.
You can actually ask her, what about Lordaeron?
She's got a basic bitch robe. She has no special model or even a cool model. She's got a robe that you can buy in the auction house right now.
It's a very simple look. She doesn't stand out. And when you ask her about Lordaeron, she says, I'm just Kalia. That's it. There's no... So I remember thinking, damn. And I thought about
that squashed our theories.
And it did squash our theories. And I remember saying to Jack, I said, there's no way that they're bringing Kalia Menethil and Alonsus Faol as followers in Legion and then forgetting about them for the rest of lore. I said, this is a cookie crumb trail. No, there's no way. And you look at the other Class Hall followers are huge. Darian Mograine is a Class Hall follower. He's important. But the Death Knights in their Class Hall resurrect Nazgrim, General Nazgrim from Garrosh's Corcoran. They resurrect Thoris Trollbane, the King of Strom. They resurrect Lady Whitebane from Scarlet Monastery. And I thought, there's no way those characters are just minor followers. And the same thing they did with Paladins. The whole Paladin Class Hall was on the Vindicar canonically. And early in Legion, we get introduced to Eretor. Who's Eretor? He's the son of Turalian and Illyria. Why is he my follower? And he's supposed to be... He got slammed into our face for a reason. So when Turalian and Illyria came back in 7.3, we knew, oh yeah, that's their son. If they didn't make him a Class Hall follower, there would have been no connection there. So they did it with several characters, and I was convinced, Jack and I were both convinced, Kalia and Faol, this is a cookie crumb quest right now that's going to lead into something, not Legion. I didn't think it was going to come in Legion, but after.
Oh, no.
And I had no idea that not only would we be right, but that Christy Golden would write an entire novel on it. So
it's really the focus, practically, of the novel. And to the scale, the scope, oh my god.
When we got the BlizzCon preview of Before the Storm, the big reveal was that Sylvanas wanted Stormwind, which was the biggest red herring ever, because all this time before the books come out, we're like, why does she want Stormwind? Never did I ever in my life imagine that Kalia Menethil would be a main character in the story. So when Anduin goes to Netherlight Temple and he comes face to face with Faol, I was like, oh, this is neat, a little cameo. And then he goes, I want you to meet someone else, Kalia Menethil. And I was like, whoa, there's no way they're doing this. And suddenly I was so excited, because this is a theory that Jack and I have had for a while. Now, I'm going to derail here, because there's a very important part of Kalia's story, and Jack actually doesn't know anything about this. I didn't tell him. I didn't write it in the notes. So Kalia, if you're listening to this podcast, obviously you read the book or you don't care about spoilers. In the story, Kalia has nightmares, and in these nightmares, she's rocking a crib, singing to her baby, to a baby. It's her baby, and she gets attacked by an undead, and Anduin sees this sort of motherly love in Kalia when she's hugging this girl named Philia. Anduin sees Kalia hugging Philia, and he gets this sort of intuition. He says, Kalia, is there something I should know? And we find out that she did have a daughter. And so what happened was, so at this point, I'm going to include what's canon and what's my theory. And here we go. And to me, there is a flaw in this theory, but this could be the Jon Snow parentage of World of Warcraft. Diva Gregor, if you're listening, this is what I was talking about. This is the big reveal, okay? Now, if you're listening, you might already know the answer where I'm going with this. But Jack, if I say the name Lady Mara, do you know what that means? Don't Google it. Lady Mara.
I will not. Lady Mara, no.
Okay.
Honestly, I go to other game franchises.
So this is canon. Lady Mara was a clerist, specifically clerist, of Northshire, and she helped the refugees escape from Stormwind during the First War. Okay. And she gets... We don't know if Lady Mara was her name. Like, did she have the title Lady? Why would a clerist have the title Lady? Maybe she was given that title as like as a knighting later on, whatever. But Lady Mara helps refugees escape Stormwind. But what if Lady Mara had a son? So brings the son, escapes with Lothar and little baby Varian from child Varian from Stormwind, and they go to Lordaeron and they appeal to King Taranis. And this little son, Lady Mara's son, he grows up in Lordaeron. And he becomes a soldier. He becomes a soldier following in the steps. He sees these paladins of the Silver Hand, and he's like, man, I want to be one of those one day. So he grows up becoming a soldier. He becomes a footman. This is theory, what I'm saying right now, okay? let's go back to the story. Kalia marries a footman. Kalia doesn't marry a noble. She marries a footman and has a baby with him. And only mom knows. Dad doesn't know. Taranis doesn't know. But Queen Mama Menethil knows. And obviously they don't want to tell Taranis because he's going to get super infuriated and he's too focused on Arthas. So, as we know in the book, Kalia and Mom go off on a little trip and Kalia has the baby. They decide that the baby should be raised by Footman, the dad, husband to Kalia, until Arthas has an heir, and then they would tell Dad, and hopefully he would, the son's name would become anointed into nobility, and Kalia's name would be clean of all of that not marrying a noble kind of character. So we learn this in the book. So back to Lady Mara. This is back to being a theory. Lady Mara's theoretical son marries Kalia. They have a baby. They have a daughter. Kalia escapes Lordaeron, goes to South Shore, reunites with her husband, with her daughter, and then the weird scourge attack happens and they get separated. Kalia thinks they're dead. But what if her husband, this knight, this footman, are not dead? Lady Mara's son decides that the only place he can go, he thinks Kalia is dead at this point. This is all theory. Lady Mara's son and the daughter go to Stormwind. They decide to go to Stormwind because that's the last bastion of humanity. They go there, and he seeks out King Varian. King Varian, this young king, he just married Queen Tiffin. Lady Mara's son goes to Varian and says, Varian, I have some very important news. You don't know me, but I am the secret husband of Kalia Menethil. This is our daughter. But I'm also the son of a very important priest from the Northshire Abbey who helped in the First War. And he says, who are you? I am the son of Lady Mara Fordragon. My name is Bolvar. Now hold on. Now we're going to jump to Battle for Azeroth. Bolvar Fordragon has a daughter.
Okay.
We didn't know about. Bolvar Fordragon's daughter is named Talia. Taelia. Taranis, Kalia, Talia.
Oh, shit.
Talia, when you get to Kul Tiras, introduces herself later on. She was sent by Bolvar from Stormwind to be raised in Kul Tiras by Dalen Pradmore. Dalen sends her off as a ward to be a ward for one of his generals, Cyrus. Cyrus is alive. Cyrus does not go to Theramore with the rest of the fleet because he's raising Talia. Talia gets letters from Bolvar her whole life. When you meet Talia, she first says, my father was a knight from Stormwind. My mother was from Lordaeron who died.
Interesting.
What if Talia's mother is Kalia Menethil?
And that means that Kalia Menethil's husband was Bolvar oh my god.
Fordragon.
That would be rather poetic.
What if this is... So think about everything we know about Bolvar. So there's some flaws in the story. So let's go back to my theory.
Sure.
So for anyone who's kind of lost right now, here's what's canon. Lady Mara Fordragon exists in lore. She was a hero who helped in the First War. She's a statue in your Paladin class hall. Her last name is Fordragon. We don't know her relation to Bolvar. Kalia marries an unknown soldier in Lordaeron, has a baby, gets separated. She doesn't know their fate. In Battle for Azeroth, we find out that there's a girl named Talia whose father was a knight from Stormwind, later reveals to be Bolvar Fordragon, and whose mother died in Lordaeron during the Third War. That's canon. My theory is that Kalia is the answer, and so we have to send Bolvar. She says, my father's a knight from Stormwind. So Bolvar goes to Varian and says, help me, not only am I the son of Lady Mara Fordragon, but I'm also the husband of Kalia Menethil. And remember, Taranis helped Varian. Varian grew up, in Lordaeron Keep after the First War with Arthas. Arthas was like a brother to him. So, Taranis is dead at this point. Varian's like, I owe Taranis Menethil so much, so the least I can do is protect his granddaughter. So what if, to kind of legitimize Bolvar, he decides to knight Bolvar. So right away, knights Bolvar. And if anyone asks why, he says, oh, because he's, survived Lordaeron, saved some people, and he's the son of Lady Mara. Doesn't tell anyone that he was married to Kalia. Shortly later on, Tiffin Rin dies in the riot that happens in Stormwind. And what if there's a conversation of, is your city, Stormwind, safe for the heirs of 2 human kingdoms? And Varian says no. And so Bolvar says, well, help me send her away. Help me send her somewhere safe. And Varian says, Kultiras. That is where we'll send her, to Kultiras, to Dalen Proudmoore. But we won't even tell Dalen who she is. We'll just tell her she's your daughter. We won't tell her that she's a Menethil. And in return, Bolvar says, I can't go with her. I want to keep the secret, so I will serve you. You help me with this, and I pledge my service to Stormwind. Anduin even says, I remember Bolvar writing letters to you. He used to call Talia his little starshine or something like that. And so it wasn't like a secret thing. Bolvar told people he had a daughter. We're just learning this now in lore. And she doesn't know what's happened to her father. She doesn't know the fate of her father. But think about the Wrathgate situation. Think about what Bolvar says. He screams out, Arthas! The blood of your father, of your people, demands justice! Suddenly the Wrathgate becomes so much more personal between Bolvar Fordragon and Arthas Menethil.
Yeah, absolutely. It does make you wonder if that's why Bolvar was so willing to contain the Scourge, because of what it had wrought upon his family.
And so
that he knew better than most what he had to save the world from.
I feel like this is there's too much coincidence in that we don't know what happened to Kalia's husband and daughter, and that Talia's mother is a woman who died in Lordaeron. Now, a good friend of mine
was thought to have died.
A good friend of mine from our Discord, Ladis, and I have talked about this a lot, and Ladis pointed out how it was common knowledge that Bolvar rose to become Regent Lord of Stormwind when Varian vanished. I'm like, that is true. That wasn't private knowledge. So, what was Kalia doing all these years? Was she being kept in the dark? That's a major plot hole in this whole theory, is how did Kalia never hear about Bolvar Fordragon becoming Regent Lord of Stormwind?
Oh, becoming Regent Lord.
Yes, because after Varian vanishes,
that is a good question.
Still a child, right? So he steps up.
I have a minor going back. Footman may not mean foot soldier. I may have watched too much Downton Abbey, but they called their servants footmen. Now I know in Warcraft you can call a soldier a footman. So there's also a possibility that, her husband wasn't a soldier but a servant.
I think it does say in the book, like it says footman, but it also says he served in the army. I think it blatantly says that he was a soldier at some point.
That was a point of confusion for me.
Okay.
But that is a good question. If Bolvar was in this prominent position, why was she still in the shadows? Why didn't she reach out to him? Say, hey, I am alive. Where's that baby?
And so, where's that baby? So,
where's that baby?
I'm wondering how much was Kalia kept in the dark? How much did Faol keep from her after all these years to protect her?
If she was in hiding in some obscure location, she probably wouldn't have that information. She wasn't sitting in Stormwind eating cheese in the Mage District, right?
That we know of.
This is a woman who has lived in obscurity that we know of. Yeah.
You don't know. She could have been.
That's true.
I hope that this theory is as exciting for you guys listening as it is for me, because this could be huge. And there's one point I really want to say, but I haven't mentioned it at all yet, so we'll come back to that at the very, very end. But let's go on to Faol. Okay, so Alonsus Faol returns in Legion, which I thought to be really... Kalia Menethil's fate has been unknown for all these years. But Alonsus Faol, we knew he died before the Third War. It says he died before the Third War. And that was it. There was that place in Tirisfal Glades, Foul's Rest, that you went to. And there was... I never had any discussion about, what if he came back as a Forsaken? Because he died before the Third War. I guess the possibility was there that he could have been resurrected, but there was a tomb, and the idea never passed through my mind. So when I saw him return as the Bishop of Secrets in Legion, I was like, whoa, this is pretty important. This dude is huge. And I don't think a lot of people realize how important...
Even I didn't.
Even you didn't realize.
No, it's just like, this is an interesting little side lore character who they've brought back to life, but like, whatever.
And I think his importance isn't so much in how much he's in the Warcraft 2 books, because he's not, but more so what he did in terms of like at that moment in history. And he's the one who basically said, what if we took priests and gave them plight and a weapon? And he's the guy who came up with the Knights of the Silver Hand. He was the Archbishop of Lordaeron. It was originally in original lore he was the Archbishop of Northshire, but they retconned that he was in Lordaeron when the refugees showed up. And he's the one who created the Knights of the Silver Hand, the first 5 paladins. He's the one who later goes on to knight Arthas. All this sorts of stuff happens. And they made note that he was a short character, very stout, with a long white beard, but very cheerful, very, very, unlike Uther and these other characters who were good men, but they were soldiers at heart, right? They were soldiers who became paladins, while Turalyon was a priest who became a paladin. And Faol was just a very important, solid character in that he founded this organization that had such a profound impact on the lore, and then he died off screen, and that was it. So to have him come back was a red flag out the yin-yang for me, because I was like, okay, this dude is important. Why are they bringing him back? So to see him in the book so much was... And to have Christy Golden write his personality and to write these little quirks about him.
Beautiful.
I fell in love with Faol. I was already interested in Faol when Legion came out.
Adore him.
One of the best... I'll let you gush about Faol, because you were gushing as you read the book. You were texting me and freaking out over Faol.
Oh my god! I mean, this is fresh. Within the past several hours, I've come to fall in love with Faol, and he is a Forsaken who has managed to hold on to joy and liveliness in such a way that is both wise and inspiring, really moving. I mean, and it's not overdone. He's still a Forsaken, and he embraces the fact that he's a Forsaken. You were telling me earlier, it's funny how he jokes about the fact that he's undead. He
makes jokes. So the first thing he says is, Anduin looks at him and he's like, you might not recognize me, but I'm Alonsus Faol. And to Anduin, that's huge. Anduin is like, yo, I read all of your books. I read your biography. I saw your portraits. And he says, I'm a little different than my portraits. I used to be a lot heavier and I had a beard. And he makes reference to, I'm dead. And he's the first person to kind of shrug that off. And he's actually, the part that stands out to me the most is when they're in Stromgarde at the very end. And it's the night before the big reunion, and all the human civilians, all the humans who are meeting their Forsaken family members the next day, they all decide to go to the church inside Strom. Now remember, Strom it's a ruined city. And
a former kingdom.
And ogres and syndicate have lived in it over the years, so it's in the dumps. And so they go to the church, and Faol is already there, so they're a little bit nervous because there's a Forsaken priest standing before them. But they've got Kalia Menethil, and he's also wearing his full bishop outfit, so he flat out says, "Hey guys, I'm Alonsus Faol, and I haven't changed." And he makes a joke about it being a little bit drafty. And there's no roof on the church because it's a ruin. There's holes in the wall, and he's the first one to say, it's a little bit drafty in here. And they kind of, the people sitting in the pews kind of laugh awkwardly because they're not used to Forsaken. And yet here he is making jokes like
all charm,
like the coolest priest ever. Just like, hey guys, let's drop some jokes and drop some hymns and drop some sermons, and we're good.
I'm not going to bore you with some sermon, right?
Let's make a joke about the rain.
He is the potential of what a Forsaken can be. One who embraces the second life and goes, I'm going to keep on living. And I don't know, he has this wisdom to him that has not been diminished by the transformation he's had to endure. I don't know. It's really resonant in the book in a way that I don't think that we can relate over voice over a podcast. But when I first saw him as a follower, I didn't think that he would be this.
Right? You just thought so many people just passed him off as, oh, he's just a follower. He's just some guy going to send on missions. That's it. And he's so much more. When he first came back in lore, I got really sad because right after priests go off to get their artifact weapons, he's the first one you meet. And you've just done the Broken Shore at this point. So Tyrion is dead. Or at this point, everyone thinks Tyrion's dead. Tyrion doesn't actually die until the Paladin quest chain. But as far as everyone knows, Tyrion dies in front of everyone's eyes on the Broken Shore. And Tyrion was one of the original 5. Uther is gone, Saidan Dathrohan is gone, and Gavinrad the Dire is gone. Those are 3 out of the 5 Paladins. The other 2 who are alive are Turalyon, who at the launch of Legion was still out in space doing his thing, and Tyrion. So with Tyrion just literally 10 minutes prior had just died on the Broken Shore, I thought, man, I'm a little bummed out there's not going to be a reunion with Faol and the old boys. And I kind of forgot about it. I just forgot about that. And then when Turalyon came back at 7.3, I thought, that'd be cool. That'd be a cool reunion, but I didn't think much of it. My favorite scene in the entire book is the Church of the Holy Light scene in Stormwind between Anduin, Turalyon, Faol, and Gen. And that to me was almost was Alliance. I don't want to use the word fanboys. Alliance players, Alliance who sympathize with the humans who hate the Forsaken. And there is a side there. Those who survived, those who were part of the Alliance, lost so much to the Scourge. The horrors of what happened to their family and their loved ones. And we see that with Emma. She has these nightmares. She thinks about her sister, her brother-in-law, her brother, and her 3 sons all died in Lordaeron. She has these nightmares about it. So the survivors of the plague, who were part of the Alliance, they hate the dead because of all the horrors that they went through. And that scene in the church is almost in the same way that Turalyon and Gen are being forced to look at the Forsaken. It's Alliance players, it's those who hate undead and who love that real Warcraft 2 Crusader-ish kind of character. It's forcing a new perspective on you that we've never had in any World of Warcraft novel, quest, cinematic, anything. It is and they took these 2 very old characters, Gen Greymane, the Grumpy, and Turalyon, leader of the Army of the Light, has been around for 1,000 years up in space, and still, and side note here, I'm kind of not letting you speak here, Jack, but a couple of comments I saw that Turalyon's behavior was out of character because he is the leader of the Army of the Light. And Anduin even says to himself, like, bro, why are you freaking out? Like, you're friends with a demon. Literally, his general in the Army of the Light is a dreadlord infused with the light. So why is he okay with that, but not with Faol? And I was a little bit confused. But think about it. Turalyon just got back from his, 1,000-year vacation. He just get back and he goes, hey, how's Lordaeron doing? And they say, oh, man, we got some news for you. Not only did your crown prince kill your king and then kill everyone and plague everything, but all of those people were turned into undead creatures, which, by the way, was a weapon of the Burning Legion, your arch enemy. And then half of those undead creatures became free-willed and joined the Horde, the same Horde that attacked Azeroth when you first vanished. And oh, by the way, those undead civilians of the Horde have now plague-bombed South Shore and all these other places, including Gilneas. So he comes back and gets all of this information all at once.
And is probably hearing a lot of bullshit from Gen.
Oh, like, a huge amount of bullshit from Gen, and rightfully so. Gen's son is gone, Gen's country is gone, so he's hearing all these perspectives from Admiral Rogers and Gen and all these different players who have been around for the last 20 years, and he's going, so there's nothing good about, the fact that he wouldn't see undead as a good thing to begin with, but now that they're sentient, part of the Horde, but still going Scourge, Blight weapon crazy, Turalyon has a fresh perspective on Forsaken, and it's not a good one. Even if he had 1,000 years to be friends with the demon up in space, his home is gone, his friends are gone, and that's all he sees. So when he is forced to look at Alonsus Faol, his anger isn't so unreasonable. His anger is justified for that 1 second until Faol does the mic drop and says, both to Gen and to him, says to Gen, the only reason you're angry is because you're afraid to admit that if I'm anything but a monster, your son died for nothing. And he does that mic drop for both of them, and Turalyon just breaks down crying. Turalyon just breaks down, and it's this beautiful scene. It was the reunion I wanted so bad that and Christy Golden got to write it. That was the best part. It was not a quest. It was not in game. It was a book, and I would love to see that as a cinematic. But seeing it in full written page form was beautiful.
Oh, it's more vibrant in a book.
Definitely.
Get the emotion. Now, there's also the moment where Faol approaches Turalyon and says, feel the light within me. And if you can't see any light within me, strike me down, for I do not want to be a lightless monster. I'm paraphrasing here, but that's what he says to him. And he opens his arms wide and stands within striking distance of Turalyon. And then Turalyon does that. He searches for the light within Faol. And up until this point, we have been told that Forsaken have a very difficult relationship with the light. Forsaken are injured by the light. Not physically, but spiritually. It burns. It burns not in a way that's going to make your skin melt, but in a way that's going to make your soul wail. And Faol uses it with such ease, and Turalyon feels that. That's both a huge implication for Forsaken priests and for the character Faol himself. It makes you wonder, does Faol's dedication to the light transcend his undeath, the resistance of his body to the light? Is he such a benevolent figure that even somebody who has been raised by the shadow-aligned necromantic powers of the Scourge, that he can hold the light and then go to the High Exarch of the Light's army and say, can you feel the light within me? Because I can. Like, oh my God, that's
huge.
I don't know. It's huge. That's groundbreaking. That's different. That's totally new. That was a moment for those two, but it was also a moment for Forsaken in general. It says Forsaken don't have to be shadow priests. They can be priests. They can be everything everybody else can.
And that, the biggest argument was originally Shadow Priest as a spec only existed as Forsaken. Sure, there was cultists who knew shadow magic, but the concept of Shadow Priests was made by Forsaken. And so
Cult of the Shadow, yeah.
The Cult of the Forgotten Shadow with Natalie Celine.
Forgotten Shadow.
You forgot.
I forgot the Forgotten.
And Natalie Celine, the author of that whole manifest, she's a player in the class hall for priests, and turns out she's alive as well, which we won't get into, but that was pretty cool as well. And Forsaken have always had this big no-no on worshipping the light, and there's this moment at the end of the book, a character asks Kalia for a blessing, and she does give a blessing. And it mentions they wince, or there's a slight look of discomfort, which goes back to, the light harming the Forsaken. So there is some sort of, not a physical skin melting as you just said, but there is something there that harms.
There's a physical element. CDev covered this, I believe, in a Q&A. When a Forsaken channels the light, they begin to regain their senses even more. They smell their own rot. They feel the maggots burrowing in their skin or their body beginning to mummify. And that at first was viewed as a horror. Why would you channel the light? Why would you surpass this awful feeling just to regain senses of your own curse? And Foul is showing, it's good to regain those senses. It's once you get past the horror of it, it's light. It's joy. That's what the light is, and it allows you to reconnect with a life that you had thought that was no longer yours. And that's to the Dark Lady. That's so subversive. That's insane. It really struck me.
Groundbreaking, definitely, for just priests, Forsaken, role players in general. So that's why when I told you, Jack, I said there's a scene, and you're like, don't tell me, and I just said Church of the Holy Light. That's all I'm gonna say, because that scene was so important to me. And,
oh my goodness!
And I'm glad that it happened. I'm glad that reunion happened in a novel.
Me too.
The other person who was there and who couldn't handle Foul's big microphone drop was Gen. And Gen is a character, as we know, very anti-Forsaken.
Oh, let me be frank. I have hated Gen for a long time. I've been a Sylvanas fanboy. Frankly, admittedly, a Sylvanas fanboy for a long time, so I naturally hate Gen.
It has to be. But I'll let you continue. Keep going.
No, but I mean, you had a point to make on his reaction to Foul, and his reaction to Foul was to be expected. He found him abhorrent. He thought he was a puppet. But Foul's words were true, and Gen is a man who knows the virtue of honesty and holds those truths to his core. He is a man with honor despite his suffering and despite his anger and rage. And well,
Foul's words really struck him true, and we don't see that at first. He's very cranky when they're in Strom. He's very, he's cranky the whole book.
He's reticent.
But we don't see that change really coming into effect until the very end. I did enjoy Gen's relationship with Anduin. It was a lot of people have been saying, especially since the Alliance fire on the Forsaken fleet in Stormheim, a lot of people said, the Alliance started the faction war, and it was like, no, it didn't start anything. Gen just took advantage because he lost his country. It wasn't an innocent attack on, let's say, South Shore. It was an attack on a Forsaken fleet.
The faction.
But people have been saying for quite some time that Gen has been whispering in Anduin's ears as this, warmonger.
I've been one of those people.
And you were one of those people. And it was interesting to see how much of that was true. And not so much whispering, but just constant, Anduin has all of his advisors at the table, and he gets to Gen, and Gen slams his hand down and says, screw the Forsaken. It's like, yep, okay, moving on. And he goes to the next person, and he doesn't ignore Gen, but he's quick to pass over his hatred in front of others. But one-on-one, there's a very interesting relationship, and it's a very friendly relationship. Anduin even says, I'm leaving the city for a bit. I'm putting you in charge. Is there going to be a coup? And Gen says, no, there's not going to be a coup today. And he goes, all right, save your plottings for next time. And despite the fact that Gen is so frustrated with Anduin that he's all peace-loving and accepting with Forsaken, Gen still looks to Anduin as a father character. Anduin just lost his father. Gen has lost his son, and there is that. I respect you. You're my king, but I'm also gonna speak my mind. And sure. Anduin allows that freedom. Now, there's a crucial moment at the end of the story, and we're coming to that big bit here. We might as well just come pouring in at all angles here. Jack, tell me what was going on in your mind at the end of that story. I start with the beginning of the meeting.
Of the meeting in
Strom.
Arathi.
Yeah.
Oh jeez. In the beginning, my heart was just full of joy. The Forsaken and the humans were old Emma. We've seen her. If you've been playing WoW for as long as we have, you know old Emma, especially if you played not Forsaken, the Alliance. She's the old lady who's been walking through Stormwind with a little bucket. You can talk to her.
Literally for 14 years, she's been in game.
Literally walking back and forth. It's kind of funny to read, like, oh man, I've got some endurance because I've been bringing buckets of water back and forth for, yeah, bitch. Yeah, you have. And you deserve some story time.
Arms of steel.
Yeah, right. She's very toned.
Very.
But it was touching, and to see the Forsaken portrayed as what they could be, as people who have been the unfortunate bearers of a curse, but also the humans. Humans have such capacity to evolve and to adapt and to be empathetic. There's this wonderful joining of two races who should hate each other, but they love each other. We transcend that. So that's how I come into this meeting. Like, this is beautiful. I have a tear. Ophelia is a great character. She's so strong, and she sees beyond her father's curse immediately. Maybe not immediately.
Well,
take that. She was shocked at first, but
there was that moment of shock. But then she says, he smiles. And then says, it's really you, Papa. There's no hesitate. Like, there is hesitation because, oh my God, this guy's dead. And then he smiles, and that vanishes. That's what sold me on their reunion is that she says, it's really you, Papa.
I agree. And there's an interesting thread that's weaved through this and is especially poignant in this moment. Is that the Forsaken are fragile physically. We've been told for so long that the Forsaken are enduring. Like, you can cut them and they won't bleed. You chop off their arm and you replace it. But the flesh that they were brought into undeath with is fragile. It's not going to heal itself. It's not going to strengthen. It's only ever going to turn to dust. And her father doesn't want her to hug him because he's afraid it'll injure him. And that shows a vulnerability of the Forsaken that we haven't seen before. The Forsaken are like, we can breathe underwater. We don't have to sleep. We don't have to eat. We are immortal. But here it's, no, we are fragile. And if we're going to be who we still are, you need to be careful with us. I thought that was interesting.
And it was heart-wrenching, but then, can I hold your hand? And he gives her the choice. He goes, if you want to. And she holds his hand. And he doesn't want...
little mummy hand.
He's the first... I believe he's the one... Someone asks at the meeting, are we allowed to touch our family? And Sylvanas says, if you want, but they probably won't let you. So he's very like, can I hold your hand? Well, if you want, doesn't want to push.
Oh.
And she takes it anyway.
The ones who turn away.
That was heartbreaking.
That really wrenched my heart. Because I can imagine just... like, they've gone through so many stages. They know their family wants to meet them, and to see the person who you love, the person who you've been dying to see for a decade, who you wish more than anything you could be like a part of their lives again, just turn away from you after seeing you. Like, you're there, you're standing across from each other, and they turn away. That plays right into Sylvanas' hand, of course. She wants to believe. She wants another focus for their vengeance, because that's all she knows. As a banshee.
As sad as I was to see those who walk away, there was both sides. We saw Emma embrace all three of her boys. We saw Philia and Wall. But then we saw, as you said, there was that one Forsaken who cried out, like, we don't know what they called out, but just yelled, like, come back. And,
I noted that in my notes.
And it was like, I have to feel for
both. I can hear it.
I have to feel for both sides, because there's that side of, you've been brave enough to say, yes, I'm gonna do this, and then all you see is this rotting husk, and you can't get past that horror in your nightmares, and you don't even give him a chance. And then for the Forsaken, it's all, the Forsaken have always been these instigators, these villains, and they're the helpless ones here in that they're given this chance, and at the last second it's taken away, and they can't. And then there's those who just hang their head and walk quietly back to the wall, and that was gut-wrenching. And I shared
Oh my
Emma's
God.
thoughts of those poor Forsaken.
Those
Humans.
poor souls.
Both sides. It was like, you just wish that Faol could have grabbed both of them and said,
Big group hug.
big group hug, talk right now. But no, it was the emotional tension of 10 years of horrifying things. And, a lot of people might say, like, I would have went to meet my family members, no problem. They're assholes for turning away. But it's like, would you have? For 10 years, you haven't known the fate of your family, and now you know they're undead. And sure, that's immortal, but they're, the things they did as Scourge, what they may look like, there's 10 years of memories there, of nightmares, that it might not be the easiest thing to get over. And for the Forsaken, it's this, we were given a chance, and at the last second that was taken away, and that plays right into Sylvanas' hands.
Oh, of course. Right from the beginning, the Forsaken were turned away. The Alliance did not want them because they're monsters. And to have that reinforced 10 years later against all information and all odds, like, that goes right into the narrative she wants. Because at this point, she's realizing that she has achieved the world that she wanted for her Forsaken. They are accepted. They're beginning to be accepted. And back in the day, that was like a glorious vision. But she's realizing that if the Forsaken are accepted, if the Forsaken are cherished by the people who used to love them, then she has no power.
None.
She isn't the Banshee Queen anymore. She's just another undead. And her sisters and her don't get along.
So she has to keep that power somehow.
Yeah. And she may not want to be war chief, but she does want to lead the Forsaken. They are her people.
And early on in the book, when she's thinking about the Desolate Council and how traitorous they are, and she's unsure, she says, I could gather a group of non-Forsaken Horde members, so Orcs, Tor, and Troll, march into Undercity, seize the Desolate Council, and declare them as traitors. But then she says she would much rather deter a Forsaken, and then it says any Forsaken, rather than destroy them. What happens next? Tell us your next. What happened next, and how your roller coaster went.
Oh God! So Parkwall and Philia are having this amazing moment, and then Parkwall turns to Kalia. Kalia is on the battlefield. Kalia wanted to be there, and Kalia is talking to Elsie, previously known as Velcinda, the prime governor of the Desolate Council, and then they're talking. They're embracing this moment. Parkwall turns to Kalia and is like, I'm paraphrasing here, but we need you. That he's speaking spontaneously. He hadn't thought this through, but we need you to lead us. He doesn't say that exactly,
he says,
but
the time has come.
The time has come. That's it, and that resonates with Kalia on a deep level because she's been having these nightmares. She's been going to the Naru, and the Naru has said to her, You have a purpose. You will lead the most broken people to salvation, but it will be through blood. But you will come to unite with them. I'm paraphrasing again, but that's the gist. And Kalia in this moment is like, I see what he means. I need to assume the Menethil name. I am Kalia Menethil. I'm not just Kalia. I am not just Kalua. I am the heir to Lordaeron, and these are my people.
And there's that
line. And they have been usurped.
There's that line that stood out, and you texted me this line. A Menethil was the one to cause this. A Menethil will be the one to fix it.
Yes. Oh man, when I read that, I was like, yes, go girl. I just people are gonna be like, oh, this guy's totally an Alliance sympathizer. No, I have loved Sylvanas, but this transcended that. Because what I love more than Sylvanas is the story of the Forsaken. The Forsaken are caught between a horrifying curse, the worst curse, and their humanity, or their elfdom, whatever race they were before they became scourged. And Sylvanas denies that, but Kalia is saying we can take this and we can rise above. and it's beautiful. Kalia then turns and she's like, I'm going to help these people defect. These people have decided to defect. They begin to walk towards the Alliance on the field to seek asylum with Anduin Wrynn, who will give it to them. And Kalia calls upon the light to do what she can to protect them. And Sylvanas, watching, realizes what's happening. She is losing power. She is about to be usurped by a rightful heir with a great claim. And Sylvanas makes a dire mistake. I think that Miss Sylvanas, the wonderful schemer, made a fucking horrible mistake. Because the Forsaken were never going to follow somebody who was living. They will follow someone who's dead. And she kills Kalia Menethil.
Well, not only does she kill Kalia right then, but what got me in that scene...
I've been calling her the wrong name, haven't I?
That's okay. I didn't want to interrupt. What got me...
She'll always be Kalia to me. Kalia.
See, you said it right there. Was when she started firing on the Desolate Council. And a lot of people say, I see in comments and reviews, they were traitors. And you're like, okay, fine. You want to
they
look
were
at
traitors?
Jem, Jack, and Jake, and Parkwall. You want to call them traitors? Fine. But Kalia says to Elsie, declare for me. Support me. And she says this, I can't betray my queen, not even
the Dark Lady.
Not even for you, your majesty. She calls Kalia your majesty, but says, I cannot do that. And she calls for retreat and runs towards Sylvanas. And she's gunned down. Arrows hit her right in the chest and she falls over. And Anduin watches that happen. Anduin watches these Forsaken who are running. Sylvanas' instructions were very clear. If you hear the horn, you go back to the wall, and the Alliance will go back to Strom. And the horn blared, and they started moving, and then Elsie starts screaming for retreat. So the Forsaken start running in panic, most of them, towards Sylvanas. And her Dark Rangers kill everyone. And Nathanos, her lover in life, her champion, says, what are you doing? And she says, I'm ending this right here and right now.
God, the notion that the Desolate Council were traitors is, I feel like flawed is a strong word. But Sylvanas brought them to free will and she taught them to embrace it. And if she now, as a leader, is decrying that will, she has become what she sought to defeat. To obey the Dark Lady, the Banshee Queen, without question, is no different from obeying Arthas, to hearing his voice in their heads. The Forsaken are interesting, are great, because they have free will, and because they were given the space to have that will by Sylvanas. And to view the Desolate Council as traitors, I think, is to have a poor view of the Forsaken. It is to view them as scourge, not as what they have become and what they need to embrace if they are going to continue to live in this world. To view them as traitors is to view them as mindless monsters who just need to follow their Lich Queen. And that is where the path that she is on. I believe that she can be redeemed on this path. She feels regret. She feels regret at a certain point in the story. But she is so far down her path that you have to ask the question, can she turn back at this point?
She feels regret for certain things, though, right? She feels regret for Varian's death and for Vol'jin's death.
Yes.
She doesn't tell Anduin that she betrayed him, but there was this respect from Sylvanas to Varian for a long time. And even though Varian never really punished her for what she did to Gilneas, there was this, when the time came and the Legion showed up, Varian and Sylvanas agreed, we're putting our difficulties aside for now. Much to Gen's like, don't trust her. And Vol'jin, they never got along, but they never hated each other like she hated Garrosh. And so there were these regrets. But to me, I don't know if she can come back, because she chose, as you said, she made a very big mistake right there in taking out the Desolate Council, all of them still on the battlefield. Those who were running back to her side, she took them out without mercy. Scared. She panicked. And now she's made Kalia into a martyr.
Oh, even better. Kalia is a literal savior now. She's been brought. We actually had this debate a couple of weeks ago. I forget if you'd already read the book, but I was musing in the lore, like, okay, we know that shadow magic binds a spirit back to a corpse, and that's a Forsaken, that's an undead. I asked, well, can light do the same thing? We had this great discussion about that, and now we have the answer. Yes, light can bind a spirit back to a corpse, and it is undead. It's not a full resurrection, and that's Kalia. Kalia is resurrected, not by the Naru. That's what I love. The Naru doesn't bring Kalia back to life. Naru have tried this in the past. The Naru tried with there was a quest in Northrend, where a beautiful quest where that paladin receives the plague, and Adal itself cannot bring the paladin back to life. But the light goes through Anduin and Faol, Alonsus Faol, and brings Kalia to something that's close to life, but is still undead. And that represents this beautiful symbol of hope that Kalia died for and can bring to bear amongst the Forsaken. Sylvanas gave Kalia the greatest gift if Kalia wants to lead the former people of Lordaeron.
There was a comment left on last week's podcast on YouTube. And it was a comment left, but they took it from the forums. And here's what it says. Kalia still plans on seizing the throne of Lordaeron. She planned it all along, and she also planned her own death. I don't think that's true in Resurrection. It could be. In one brilliant chess move, she made herself simultaneously a martyr, a Christ figure, a nationalist symbol, and a representation of everything the Forsaken wish they could be, while tricking Sylvanas into a rash display of cruelty, paranoia that will sow dissent among her own people. The perfect beginning to a revolution.
At a meta level, that is all true. The way it was written, that is all true. But Kalia, it's kind of ridiculous to read a book and then assume that like every motivation you're reading is wrong. Kalia does not. She's very humble. She's extraordinarily humble, and we are shown her inner thoughts throughout the entirety of the novel. They're not going to lie to the reader. That would be very poor form in storytelling. Sylvanas also is not going to lie to the reader.
And the thing to remember also, in that final moment when Kalia pulls down her hood and declares, I was sitting here going, what are you doing, girl? Not now. Jack, you sent me a text at the beginning of the meeting and you said you were worried because Gen was there and you said he shouldn't be there.
I was worried.
And I said,
I was so nervous.
And then I said, is there someone else who shouldn't be there? And I didn't say who. Kalia was who I was talking about because her very presence
sedition.
It was starting something, and Anduin, this is where Anduin messes up, and this is where Kalia messes up. They both mess up. Anduin should have known, but she, he lets her go. He could have said no, and she shows up anyway, and that would have been her, going against Anduin's.
That's because,
but he allows it, and in that moment, she makes a very rash, and frankly, stupid but very noble decision. And she says that after, when she's been resurrected, she says to Anduin, I messed up. And Anduin says, you do realize you almost started a war that would have ended in the deaths of hundreds of thousands.
He was very serious.
And she's like, I messed up. I'm not ready to rule yet. And she admits her mistake, and she does put the blame on, I was never taught to rule, and a little bit of a silly blame, but it's true. She was never taught the formality, that decision. She's always been humble and calm. She's a priest at heart. But in that moment, a rash decision took place, and Anduin says, you followed your heart, and as a leader, you don't always have that luxury. And she's used to following her heart, right?
That is why the theory that she's some mastermind calculator is flawed, because she's flawed. Sylvanas is flawed. These are characters who are portrayed as people. They may not be humans, but they're people. And even though from a meta level, yeah, it does fit into a tight narrative of a savior. And that's not uncommon in stories like these. Kalia didn't plan it. She fell into a destiny. And it's more beautiful if you come at it from take away all the meta, all the stories and go at it from her perspective as somebody who feels these nightmares and views these people as monsters, and then is confronted with the fact every day of her life through Alonsus and then through this meeting that no, they're not monsters. They're people like her, and they're not just people like her. They're her people. They're people who she is meant to serve as their queen. That's pretty cool.
And there's a moment where she's being resurrected, and it refers to Kalia as the Queen of Lordaeron opened her eyes. And that just hit me so hard. When she was being resurrected, the Queen of Lordaeron opened her eyes, and I was like, this is it. And Jack and I used to have conversations on why Kalia should lead, but there was always that problem. Would the Forsaken
alive
follow a living leader? And I used to say maybe, because the Forsaken, despite their loyalty to Sylvanas, never hated Tyrannus. They never blamed Tyrannus.
No.
They still loved their king. So maybe that love would pass to his daughter. Arthas was the problem, not Tyrannus. But there was always
Tyrannus did what he could against Arthas.
And it wasn't... His plaque on his tomb even says, "Do not blame the father for the crimes of the son."
Yes.
So I thought, maybe they would follow a living queen. But there was always that part of the theory that was not really settling. And
also, is the queen going to sit in the fucking nasty-ass Undercity? It's a sewer. They call it an Acropolis. It's the sewers of Lordaeron.
Literally the sewers. But now that's solved. And when I said last week, guys, that this is talking about the future of World of Warcraft, this is what I mean. The Alliance and the Horde have a chance at peace. But that chance will never happen with certain characters. And Sylvanas is the biggest character who stands in the way of that. Everything she's done and everything that she's doing prevents the Horde and Alliance from ever having peace. Now you can say, Gen needs to get over it. He lost his country years ago, but you can't. When your country was chemically attacked and your people forced out and most of them killed.
Oh, sure.
That's not something that's easy to forgive. Everything that she's done in South Shore, the Plaguelands, everything, that's not easy to forgive. Especially when there's been no, I don't want to use the word punishment, but there's been no follow-up to it. The Horde does horrible things in the First and Second War, but then they get beat down like animals and they are quiet for years, and then Thrall resparks that and forms a new Horde. The Forsaken, Sylvanas never answers for her crimes, and this stands in the path of all future storylines with the peace between the Alliance and Horde, because Bane is a good guy. Lorthamar will do what's right with his people. Sarfang is the orc the Horde needs, but Sylvanas is the problem, and I think Kalia Menethil is that answer. She's not an Alliance character. Sylvanas even says that.
No, she's not.
She's not one of yours, she says to Anduin. She's one of Lordaeron's. That is important. People are thinking, the Alliance character is going to usurp Sylvanas as leader. No! Kalia was not Alliance.
So Kalia it's important to remember that Kalia is not Alliance. She may be human, but she is not a part of the Alliance, and she goes through that in the book. And Faol is not Horde, and he also goes through that in the book. And it's important to remember this. Kalia is not coming through this experience and going, I'm an Alliance leader who's going to usurp a Horde person and bring about some kind of neutral peace. She is coming at this as neutral, somebody who does not want the throne, but has realized that she is the right person to take it. That is way different than somebody who's going through some mastermind political machination from the Alliance side. Now, I know that's kind of a fine point because she is human. She's a human priest. She's a Menethil, which is, Lordaeron Alliance based. But that's not who she is now. And you need to remember who she is now and where she's coming from, where she's been for decades.
We can talk about this for so much longer. And I really wanted to talk about the light and the Forsaken and what this means, but we are going on 2 hours.
We barely touched on that.
We are going on 2 hours.
That's a whole podcast on its own.
It is, and which is why we're gonna have you back, Jack. We're gonna bring you back for round 2. So if you enjoyed hearing us talk about Before the Storm and you haven't read it yet, I honestly recommend it. If you are a Forsaken lover, if you're a Sylvanas lover, an Anduin lover, and you want a perspective that World of Warcraft has never, ever approached before, buy Before the Storm. It is my favorite book by Christy Golden. And that's saying something considering I loved War Crimes and I loved Tides of War. And
now, I don't usually read the books, full disclosure. I usually get summaries and just extract all the data after the fact. I read this one and I cried. I am so glad I read it. And I'm so glad I was pressed by Jesse to read it.
When I got my press copy weeks ago, before it came out, I've known about the story for a month. I said, Jack, you need to get this book. Well, when's it come out? It comes out on this day. Well, okay. I said, no, you seriously, there's things that you need to know. And I was like pressuring, have you read it yet? Oh, not yet. Have you read it yet? Not yet. And that's why it was kind of pushed till tonight. And I'm so glad that we're 2 hours after you finish the book. This is fresh in your mind.
I made it by the hair, the tiniest little hair of Faol's former beard.
The tiniest hair. So guys, if you enjoyed this podcast about Forsaken and you would like to hear more, we'll definitely bring Jack back. Thank you so much, Jack, for joining us on this review, ramble, rant. What was this? This was everything.
All of it, everything you want. Now, we can debate the morality of Sylvanas deeper too, if anybody's interested in that.
Yes.
Because I have been on the other side of defending Sylvanas, Valkyr, Risen, all of that. And I love that discussion.
That is a debate that I love having because depending on which mask you wear, I can stand there and defend Sylvanas. But I can stand there, especially after this book, and not defend her. And a lot of people don't really, when they defend a character, they don't look at the other side, which is why our debates work so well. And so I think it would be fun to talk about Sylvanas' morality, to talk about...
Also, Lillian Voss, what Kalia would be like if she does become queen. There's so much potential here.
There's so much to talk about, but we are going on almost 2 hours unedited, guys, so we're going to bring this to a close. Jack, I know you're not on a whole lot of social medias, even though I keep pressuring you to get a Twitter page. Maybe this podcast will be the thing that pushes you over to get a Twitter account. But maybe I doubt it. Where can these people find you if they wanted to find you? Not in real life, that's creepy, but on the internet.
The best place to find me is ArtStation. I am a 3D artist, and I do some Warcraft fan art from time to time, and I'll be uploading more pieces. You can go to Bodwell, Bodhwell. I'm on ArtStation, which is just art and station. And you can see my portfolio of work there. And if you like something, a little comment, and let me know that you appreciate the work. Or give critique if you're an artist yourself or appreciate that stuff. I plan to do a Forsaken in the future, and
especially after this book,
in honor of all this stuff. Yeah. Oh my God, I have so many ideas. But that's really where I'm at online these days. So
all right, and we'll work on getting him back on Twitter, because there was a time you were on Twitter, but not anymore.
There was a time
a long time ago. All right, guys, thank you so much for listening to this episode 9 of Decoded, a Lost Codex podcast. I am your host, Jesse. I'm here with
Jack, the Forsaken, the lover of Forsaken.
The lover of Forsaken. And
lover of Forsaken.
Jack will definitely be back. I'm not going to say hit the road, Jack.
We'll be back.
Don't hit the road.
Don't do that.
You're coming back. You are coming back. Maybe not next week, but definitely in the future. Thank you guys so much. Keep an eye out on our Twitter page for updates on our next project, which is in the works right now. No information yet, but we are starting that process very soon. So keep your eye out. Battle for Azeroth is around the corner, so do all your last second grinds if you haven't done that stuff. And we'll see you guys next week for episode 10.
Thanks, Jesse.
You're welcome. Any final words for our listeners?
Oh, Roll of Forsaken. They're awesome. You'll love it. The quest lines are great. Read the book. Buy the book. Listen to more of this podcast. That's all I have to say.
That's a good way to end. Thank you guys. We'll see you next week. Good night.